Hey, man, we're going to do this again. Good evening, guys. Dog Sports Live, breaking news, talking football. Graham, tell us what happened today.
So apparently Max Johnson has broken his
Nope.
left.
Miles Brennan.
That's right. They have similar names. Miles Brennan, the presumed
That would be really
potential
breaking news.
starting quarterback, has broken his non-throwing arm. LSU is saying it was in a freak weight room accident of some sort. But he was in contention for starting quarterback job at LSU and had a really good season last year before it ending early due to injury. So looking like Max Johnson is going to be the starter for the Tigers in 2021.
Yeah, we were set to preview the Tigers, Gators, and who's our last team? Volunteers. Yeah, and so we got this news breaking, and I was looking at Max Johnson and the quarterback play. So let's start off with our favorite. We're gonna do our metrics thing here, and so here are the three teams we got tonight, and LSU's up to the top, returning a lot of offense and defense. With the over/under wins set at 8.5. I'm curious if that's going to go down with the news. I don't think so. I mean, he was competing for that job, so it's not a huge fault. Step back.
A lot of people thought that Max Johnson was going to be the starter, anyways. At least my LSU friends feel like his ceiling is potentially higher than Brennan, although Brennan was really good last year. That's a pretty stunning chart, though, to see just how much production LSU returns on both sides of the ball. And Florida returns a lot on defense, but pretty decimated on offense. And then Tennessee, all the transfers after McDonald's bag money handout gate of the end of last season, sitting down there with 54%, second worst in the league in terms of returning production. So lots of work ahead.
Yeah, you lose one of the best linebackers, if not the best linebacker in the league, in your Toto. And you're going to suffer on that, in a lot of areas. But you can see that even though they're returning a good amount of defense, that these were all sort of bottom end of the SEC and success rate allowed on the defense, especially LSU. I'm not going to drop names, but I was within earshot of an ESPN personality, and he talked about LSU to an LSU fan and talked about how they got a little lazy and cocky. So they've got plenty of talent. It'll be interesting to see if they turn it around this year and play to their potential, because it is a good well recruited roster for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this was ever written about super publicly, but I do know on very good authority, and I've heard from quite a few people, that there was a little bit of locker room discord last year in Baton Rouge. I think the coaching staff could have handled some of the events that were going on in the country at the time a little bit better than they did. And there just kind of became a split, and Bo Pelini was there, and that whole marriage never seemed to work out from the jump. He decided to play man against an air raid offense versus Mike Leach and let KJ Costello set an SEC passing record on them. So it just sort of, that whole season kind of seemed doomed from the start in hindsight. I don't think we knew that at the time. LSU was a preseason top 10 team last year, but they seem like they've done everything they can to kind of get back to the model that worked so well for them in 2019 when they won the national title. The big question there is, will they get the same level of quarterback play and skill position play? One thing that seems like an absolute known for them on the offensive side of the ball is Kayshon Boutte, our favorite name in college football. And you've got a kind of chart here that shows it, but him and Max Johnson, have a lot of chemistry there, and got better every game.
As I was going through stuff earlier in the spring, Boutte was one of the most explosive receivers returning in the SEC. And here I've got this chart up here on his, like you were talking about, the chemistry he's got with Max Johnson. 13 catches versus Ole Miss for
SEC
20
record.
Yeah. Wow. 23.2 yards per catch. That's explosiveness rating. So that's not per per target. But yeah, and a 62% success rate. So yeah, I'm going to roll some tape on him, and maybe you want to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely one of the best returning wide receivers in the SEC. Probably the best, honestly, in my own opinion. Big, physical, former blue chip recruit type of guy that this is what everyone expected him to be when he came on campus, and this is what he is. But just extremely, extremely talented wide receiver. You can see they're really good after the catch. Very strong, good strong hands, catches the ball out away from his body. But I think that's maybe the difference between him and like a guy like George Pickens is just the work that he can do after the catch is really, really special for a guy his size. You don't often see receivers that have his size and strength that can also make those types of moves with the ball in their hands.
Yeah, I mean, again, he was absolutely one of the most explosive catches, receivers in the league. And I mean, just looking at just his highlights here from Max Johnson are pretty. I mean, yeah, he like you say, he's got all the tools to be one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. While we're running this tape, I wanted to comment a little bit on that defense. They showed signs of having good games. You've got Derek Stingley back there, who's obviously one of the best playmakers in the SEC, and you expect to give up points and yards versus Florida, even Ole Miss and Bama, but allowing 62 or something 60% success rate against Bo Nix is troubling. And Missouri had I think actually Missouri had a really good game against that LSU. So I mean, yeah, maybe that speaks to them not being focused, that they can have good games and play to their potential, but also they didn't show up for some of those games. So yeah, maybe a new coach, new DC there can get that talent and to do some results from them.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, LSU has the best pair of corners, boundary corners anywhere in college football. Stingley obviously is a known commodity who really didn't get to see the field as much last year as I think most hoped or expected. But Eli Ricks came in, another one of those guys, highly recruited, and really was just a stud from the word go, and is probably only going to get better. So anybody that's playing them is going to have their work cut out for them in terms of scheming up, getting guys open on the outside for those big kind of plays into the boundary. And it's going to be really interesting to see how offenses try to attack them. I mean, in this era of college football, good offense always seems to beat good defense, right? Like we saw, oh my God, Devontae Smith from Bama last year, like absolutely tear up that secondary and make it look very, very easy. But just your average kind of SEC pair of wide receivers is going to struggle against Ricks and Stingley.
Yeah, we were talking about, and you talked about how talented this roster is, and this is Bud Elliott's, blue chip ratio. And you can see that, talent wise and blue chip, the ratio is one of these things. These are the teams that he, deems by using this formula can win the national championship. And, there's LSU right there with the big boys, where they are a big boy, but, right here up with the best of the recruiters in the country. So, yeah, they have the talent, and, maybe a new DC can get some of the, like I said, just get better results out of that defense. And with Stingley back there, you expect them to be improved greatly this year.
Yeah, not just Stingley, but I mean, they've got two really good edge rushers in PJ Ojolari and Ali Gay. Both of those guys were very productive last year. Lots of pressures, lots of sacks. And then Mike Jones at linebacker, his run defense and tackling are a little bit shaky, but he's very, very good in coverage. And I think kind of in this stage of college football where things are, that might be what you want, honestly, is a guy that can line up on tight ends and backs and do a really good job. So what do you think for LSU? You said that over-under win total is 8.5.
Yeah, 8.5. Right. I mean, they're going to only play, they're going to play Florida and Alabama and Texas A&M, which all have higher, so there's three, if you want to count those as 3 losses. I mean, certainly that Florida game is going to be critical. It's at home. It's at Baton Rouge. It'll be a night game, most likely. So that's that's middle of the season. So these teams are gonna show themselves. You have a better idea of what they are. That UCLA game is interesting. I know Max Johnson finished the year, so he's not going to be inexperienced at all. But with the change, with losing a quarterback, you'd like to maybe start off with that McNeese State game. But here it is. They got to go to Los Angeles and play UCLA, which is returning 91%. So one of the highest, if not the highest, returning production in Power 5. It's UCLA. They're not as talented as LSU, but that's gonna be a tough game to start the year for sure.
Yeah,
and you're gonna find out real quick. You're gonna find out real quick if this team is more focused.
Yeah, the early line on that game is only like 2.5 points for LSU, which I think is pretty telling. I would expect Tiger fans to travel pretty well out there. I don't think that line is where it is because of any sort of massive home field advantage or anything like that. Like you said, UCLA returns a ton of production. They have a very dynamic quarterback in Thompson Robinson. So that could be an interesting one. LSU has kind of struggled in some of those big openers in the past. They played that series with Wisconsin and barely got away in sort of a miracle come from behind victory in one and looked really inept in the other when they played up at Lambeau Field maybe 4 or 5, 6 years ago. I do think, though, that LSU, you showed Bud's blue chip ratio up there, and he does a great job with that over at 24/7. And they are the 5th best talented team in the country. And if you told me that I can bet on the 5th best talented team in the country's season win total, and all they have to do is win 9 games for me to cash out, I would take that every year. That's where I am on them. I honestly think that if you're looking for that team that could be your sleeper playoff contender, potential conference champion, potential division champion, I think it's them. I don't know. At this point, it's kind of impossible to not pick Alabama when you're doing these preseason exercises. But what happened in 2019, right?
That schedule's backloaded for for LSU. They've got Alabama and Texas A&M in the last third of their season. Certainly that Florida game. It's a tough stretch, the Florida and a high-powered Mississippi, and followed by Alabama. But so that should give them time to find their best players and put them on the field. Especially if they can get through UCLA and Auburn.
And I think that'll help them, man. They signed, especially on defense, they signed Mason Smith, who was a 5-star, one of the top interior linemen in the country, if not the top. They signed Sage Ryan, a 5-star safety who could come in and maybe contribute right off the bat. So it's I think that defense, having a little bit of time to work some of these younger guys in, get some of these guys a little bit more experience, could be a huge advantage for LSU.
All right. Well, that's why you recruit, and that's why you have extra players, because LSU is going to be down a man. I know that a lot of guys were, Miles Brennan was going to be. I think PFF had him, as we're going to show this a little later, as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league, according to their stuff. And now it's going to be Max Johnson. So I think they've got a lot to. You got playmakers out there. I think they're going to be fine on offense, and I think we know their defense needs to improve, and if it does that, they should be dark horse to compete for that SEC West title.
Yeah, man. I honestly think I really do think that LSU. I know we're going to do all these previews for all these teams and all of that good stuff, but LSU is probably that team that I just feel really good about them, man. I feel like they're going to win 11 games. And I don't know if the loss is Bama or Florida or hell, man, that Ole Miss team, who knows what could happen anytime a Lane Kiffin offense takes the field. But I think that LSU is going to be in the conversation for a playoff berth when we get to November, and it's just going to depend on how the back end of that schedule shakes out.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about the running back we missed out on, who's going to be really good this year too. I can't remember.
Oh, Emory?
John Emory.
Yeah.
I'm talking too much Emory Jones. I got John Emory blocked
and he's very talented out of high school. He hasn't quite popped yet and sort of shown all of that potential. But like you said, this could be the year for it. And they're going to have a very good passing attack if they have a strong running back, or even if they just can find kind of that guy similar to Edwards-Helaire in 2019 who can hurt linebackers coming out of routes out of the backfield, then they're just going to be really tough to stop. I mean, as a Georgia fan, I'm really glad that they're not on our schedule, because I think that what they return on offense is as scary as, anyone, Georgia included.
Speaking of returning on offense, let's talk about Florida.
Let's talk about Florida. So, of course, this is a Georgia show. I feel like we have to caveat our preview with that, but also in saying that, when we make these over-under win total picks and bets, and a lot of these are things that I, personally will bet on. I don't make bets based on emotion. I make bets on what's going to make me money, right? So when we talk about Florida, we're just going to try and give you our honest opinion, however that may look. I don't know what you think about Florida. What do you feel about the Gators?
I just don't know how you turn over this much offense and not have some regression. And I'm not trying to make any shots, like you say, I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you I'm a fan of them, but I just don't know how they're, you've mentioned it a bunch. That's one of that, Mullen's best offenses. And they finished the year in a 3-game losing streak, and guys didn't seem to be buying in, skipping the bowl game. And I know we had that against Texas, but Kirby next time around in the Sugar Bowl versus Baylor got those guys to play. I mean, we did have some opt-outs, but the guys were there, came to play, and Georgia won that game. So, I mean, I think all the things you bring up are very, very valid. I don't think that Emory Jones may be great. He may be one of the best 3 quarterbacks in the SEC, but Trask and Pitts were spectacular last year, and I just don't know how that doesn't regress a little bit. If it regresses a little bit and the defense improves, they could be, they should potentially be one of the best teams in the SEC East. But I think we've got more than a small sample size on the Todd Grantham defense. So, and that's a defense that had a high-powered offense and still allowed 45% success rate. Alabama was giving up yards and plays on defense early in the year, and they corrected it, and they ended the season with a 38% success rate allowed on defense, and Florida's defense was going the other way. So,
right, and I think this Florida defense is definitely bound to improve. Right, like they return a lot of guys on that defense. They have a new secondary coach, which I think is kind of where internally they decided to place the blame instead of on Grantham was on the secondary coach. I don't know if it's the secondary coach's fault if you're, running 7-man blitzes half the time and leaving your guys in man coverage against modern SEC wide receivers, but we can get into that on another day. I think that Florida, this is going to be like a very big year for Dan Mullen, just in terms of we're going to find out what this program is, kind of what the culture is like, what's going on there. If the recruiting that he's done, that Georgia fans, including myself, have often been critical of, is enough to take that program and keep it where I think most everyone that's observed college football for the last 3 decades believes it should be. What's fascinating is we're looking at probably a big change in scheme back to what Dan Mullen has kind of done more historically, with dual threat passers and guys that are going to run from the quarterback position and more short passes. Not to say Emory Jones doesn't have a big arm, because he does have a big arm. But that offense has been in the SEC for 15 years now, right? And I think that there's a lot of good film on it. There's a lot of people that know how to defend it at this point. And Kirby Smart's one of them, right? Like, if you look at the Dan Mullen offenses going back to Mississippi State through his time at Florida, last year was the first time in 13 meetings that he put up more than 20 points on a Kirby Smart defense. And granted, when Kirby was at Alabama, the talent gap between Alabama and Mississippi State was significant, but there was also even with Dak Prescott, he'd never put up more than 20 points on a smart defense. So I do think if you're a Georgia fan, you probably should feel good about the matchup with Florida this year on that fact alone. And that's not to say they won't incorporate some of the passing concepts that they had under Trask last year, because they were successful with those.
Yeah, I was shown a play from Shorter there. They've got Shorter in the running back out of Clemson that are 2 5-star position players they're going to be lean on this year. I've got last year's stuff up here, and talking about that regression on offense. They as a team they had 260 total EPA for the year, and you can see Kadarius, Kyle, and Grimes there. We're almost 200 point EPA. Now it's a little misleading because those. A total team EPA counts all the negative plays, and skill position players don't get negative plays unless they fumble. So that's not exactly apples to apples, but you can still imagine that, with 3 players having a total EPA of 200 points or whatever, that's a crap load of offense they've got to replace this year. And they're, like I said, they're going to be doing it with Justin Shorter is going to be one of the main targets this year. He was a 5-star that played his freshman year at Penn State. He did play for Gators last year. Was contributed a lot, 25 catches and 3 touchdowns. And then you've got some of the other players that are still around Gainesville, Dameon Pierce and Malik Davis combined. Naquan White and Malik Davis combined for 1,000 yards combined. There was a lot of catches, but they've got players there, but it's nothing like they're gonna miss from those guys in the NFL now.
Right, and those guys had some good production last year, and they're good players, but those guys were playing against third and fourth defensive backs or linebackers last year in that offense versus save that one.
Yeah. Sorry. Here we go.
Third and fourth linebackers last year versus some of the Pitts and Tony were matched up on teams 1 and 2 DBs. So it'll just be interesting to see if those guys can do the same thing when they're playing better cover guys.
I had a rational Twitter discussion with somebody from Florida, and he would say the same thing about me. I'm not always rational, but Emory only threw 4 passes where the game was within 17 points last year. So, right. And I mean, now the Oklahoma, you got some valuable snaps. I mean, that Oklahoma team was playing to win, and it was not total mop up duty, even though the game was probably in hand. But I'm showing some of these plays right now. You can't tell me that this offense. No, he was back up, and they're going to tailor the offense for him in the offseason. But it still is. It's a different offense than what Trask can do.
100%, yeah. And I think some throws like that are the concern with Jones, just from a read standpoint and seeing the field. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? Which is that. There's some people that are really high on Emory Jones. PFF is one of them. And, a lot of that is based on his grades, right? And what he has done in their grading system in his 3 years as a backup, which I think it's important to acknowledge that PFF does not change their grading system for garbage time. If you make a play against an FCS team's third unit in the late fourth quarter of a 50-point blowout, it counts the same as playing, against starters in the first quarter of an SEC rivalry game. So keep that in mind. But the Emory Jones thing, I think, reminds me a lot of sample size, right? And this graph that you're showing right here is after Stetson Bennett's first 2 games as Georgia quarterback last year. So his passing grade was basically equivalent to what they had for Kyle Trask, who was a Heisman finalist. And I think we all know that Stetson Bennett was not a Heisman finalist last year. But in terms of the number of snaps that he had, that's how he was performing in that grading system. And he had played against Auburn and played, 3 quarters against Arkansas. And that was where he graded out. So I think slow the roll a little bit on the Emory Jones, first round draft pick. I saw a mock draft that PFF did that had him going number 11 in next year's draft to the New York Giants. That would be shocking, right? And it would be shocking because not only did he sit for a season and a half behind Trask, but he sat for quite some time behind Felipe Franks as well. And just generally speaking, a guy that spends most of their career as a backup doesn't tend to be an upgrade over the guys that they backed up. Do you have the Jeremy Johnson tweet? Did you see that?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm reminded
Did you drop
a
that
lot
in the
of
doc?
Jeremy Johnson. Yeah, it was in the doc.
Okay, hang on. Just...
So yeah, back in 2015, Nick Marshall left Auburn after a couple of really successful years as the starter there. And his backup for those couple of years was a guy named Jeremy Johnson. And he was a really intriguing dual threat athlete, all the arm talent in the world, all the physical skills in the world. And lots of people had him as he went from being a preseason all-conference talk to preseason Heisman talk, and he was kind of crowned as, this guy is going to lead Auburn to a return trip to the national title game or to the college football playoff. He was benched a few games into the season. I think his first game he went like 6 for 24, and that was that. Now, I'm not saying Emory Jones is going to go 6 for 24 in his first game, but I do think that there's some common veins there, and Emory Jones might end up being great. He could end up being an all-conference player. All I'm saying is let's let him show it as a full-time starter. Let's let him show it when defenses are preparing solely for him, and he's not kind of a change of pace quarterback in this system. And if he goes on and runs the table and is all-conference or a Heisman candidate, then I will sit here and tell you I'm wrong, but I'm 99% certain that's probably not what's going to happen with Emory Jones. And I actually will go so far as to say that I think by the time we get to the end of the season, you could see Anthony Richardson as the starter there at Florida, who did flash and have a couple good moments in that Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma. So that's my spiel on Jeremy Johnson, or I'm sorry, on Emory Jones. Sample sizes matter, and I don't think that he's going to be an all-conference level player. So I will say, though, the Florida defense, I do think is going to improve quite a bit. Brenton Cox back again. Georgia fans, we know him, right? He's a very talented pass rusher. Ventrell Miller is very solid in the middle as a linebacker. Zachary Carter is another great edge player. They've got Jeremiah Moon on the edge. They're very deep in that front seven. Secondary, Elam is back there. So there's a lot of talent on that defense, and I think that, that'll keep him in some games. But what was their over-under win total on your
9, right?
Number? 9? Okay.
Yeah, which is Alabama, Georgia, and, the LSU being the sort of make or break on that. I mean, that LSU, if they beat those 3 teams, if they lose those 3 teams and win the rest, it's a push. So
yeah.
But who knows what, it's a good number.
I think it's a fair number.
Yeah,
for sure. I personally, I think I wouldn't bet it. Just cause like you said, I think it's a push. If I had a gun to my head, I would probably go under there.
That was not an offer, Florida fans, not an offer.
Please do not put a gun to my head. I know some of you want to. I think truthfully that it'll be interesting when they get later on in the season, depending on where that team is after playing Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. If they're at 3 losses by Halloween, I don't know if Dan Mullen is the guy that keeps that team super focused and motivated and on track. And if that doesn't happen, then I could see them dropping that late season game to Missouri, or I don't know how Florida State's going to look.
I think Kentucky's that one early in the season.
That's a good one too. Yeah,
Kentucky's gonna. That's gonna be one game they're gonna circle on their schedule for sure.
They always do.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida, I think, is a transition type year. If they come out and they're a 10-2 team, then I think we will all, myself included, have to admit that Dan Mullen is doing a really, really good job down there.
It'd be like 4 straight New Year's 6 bowls, if not better than that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that he just kind of projecting what they would probably have back for 2022, then they would probably be in position for a, division title, conference title, CFP type run potentially. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But I've been wrong before, so we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, their blue chip ratio is up there. I mean, I just flashed it back up, and we were talking about an LSU, but they've got 66% blue chip ratio. So yeah, I mean, and I've looked at those numbers in a different way. I don't have the 2021 rosters yet, but you're looking at a average 247 composite rating and 0.906 or 0.907 somewhere in there. So, and Florida is one of those teams that has that, Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama have significantly more than that, but Clemson most years has right around there. So yeah, they definitely have the talent. And Mullen's a good coach, and they're pushing all their chips in on the table with Emory. So we'll see.
I think Mullen is a really brilliant offensive mind. I think as a head coach that's responsible for recruiting, program culture, staff management, PR. He struggles in some of those areas, but his track record with offensive scheming is hard to argue against. But it's just, I think Emory Jones is a really fascinating case because there's the narrative around Dan Mullen that he's just a wizard quarterback developer, and Jones has been in the program for a very long time now. So
let's see if he's a tough kid from Bainbridge.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is just like it's gonna be interesting to see if Jones has developed as much as the narrative should, kind of say he should have.
Graham, you were pretty nice. Bravo.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say we're trying to be professional here, but we're trying to be real.
No, I mean, we are trying to be professional. And I mean, like, that's my honest take. I think they'll be better on defense. I don't believe the Emory Jones hype because I haven't seen enough to believe it. I do think that Dan Mullen will generally find a way to be efficient on offense. But if you go back through his career, that kind of system he runs, it usually beats the teams that it should beat, and it loses to the teams that it should lose to. And I think that's how their season will go.
As a Georgia fan, I got my feathers or the hairs on my back of my neck all riled up when I saw that, that Emory was so highly rated by PFF. I went back and tried to find some of their, I think they're really good at breaking down players. And, I think they're not as solid projecting, we don't know what Jamie Newman would have done last year, but we all know the Jamie Newman PFF narrative.
We all know he's been cut already.
Yeah, they do hit on some of them. These guys that sort of come out of nowhere, and maybe Emory's one of those. Matt Corral certainly is on everybody's list as one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. But they took a shot and they called a shot with Emory, so we'll see. All right, let's pivot. Let's pivot to Tennessee. So here we go. I'm gonna put up the stats again. Their over under is 6 wins, and they're kind of. I would have thought that their returning production would have been lower than 54% myself, but there it is. And that's a defense that's missing one of its best players, Henry Toho, who went to Alabama, and that was still a defense that allowed 47% success rate. They've got a lot of holes to fill.
They do have a lot of holes to fill. Their blue chip percentage is still 42%. Which is kind of crazy to think about, right?
I think it's one of those things, you look at the curve, and it drops.
No, it's actually 48%. So they're right outside of that number, which I'm not sure if all the transfer stuff had shaken loose when Bud released those numbers a month or two ago. But my point being, like, there still is a lot of talent on that roster, and I think that's worth considering when we talk about them.
Yeah, they start off with Bowling Green, and then is that Pittsburgh? I got to do a better job on this and find out if that Pittsburgh game's on the road, because that's an interesting. That's at home. That's going to be a really good game. You can see that Pittsburgh has obviously lost their secondary coach and one of their best players on their defense to Georgia, but
no, that's West Virginia.
All right, well, it's close. A backyard brawl, whatever the other
They
side of
hate
that.
each other,
So
but
just
yeah.
ignore what I said. Solid. No, anyway. So, but yeah, okay. So 73%. That's a veteran team coming in. That's actually a pretty good net yards per play that Pittsburgh's bringing into them. I mean, you can see that defense allowed 35% success rate. So they're gonna have a. That's gonna be a tough game for Tennessee
Yeah, it will.
coming up.
It will. It definitely will.
Yeah, I mean that's a rough start. You got Bowling Green, you got that Pittsburgh, and then you do have Tennessee Tech, but it's Florida, Missouri. That's a front loaded schedule, but then it just gets worse. It gets that's gonna be a tough. I don't know. I got a feeling we're gonna take the under on that with a Ole Miss is gonna want a piece of them, and Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky. That's brutal schedule.
Well, so I mean they're over under 6 wins, right?
Yeah.
So I mean you got to assume Bowling Green, Tennessee Tech, South Alabama, and Vanderbilt are going to be wins.
That's 4. South Carolina.
South Carolina is probably going to be a win, and then I could see them.
And they got to beat.
I could see them beating Pittsburgh. I could see them. I could see them potentially beating Ole Miss. I could see, I don't know. The thing with them is they've got Hendon Hooker coming in, who is a very talented, player, and I think he will add a run element to the Heupel offense. I believe that Josh Heupel is going to find ways to score points because that's where he's done everywhere he's been. And one of the things that wasn't decimated for them kind of was that receiver position, and that's an area they did recruit pretty well. I just kind of I just think that.
Are you there? We might have lost Graham here, but Velus Jones was one of their players. You there? Hang on. You're back.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Good.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, depending on how the season kind of starts, like if they win that Pittsburgh game at home and, the Neyland's full and there's sort of that energy and everyone gets all excited, that you may see them knock off like a Missouri or a Kentucky or kind of some of those like tier 2 SEC teams this year and have a 6-7 win season and go to a bowl.
I'm selling on Tennessee. I think Heupel's a good coach, but I just think it's just kind of a mess this year. One of those year zeros that you hear Andy Staples talk about. You lose Eric Gray and Ty Chandler, some of the 1,500 yards rushing. They do have this Tion Evans kid who's coming out of JUCO, who was I think the number 3 overall JUCO player, number 1 running back. Velus Jones is a good receiver, plays hard, and he was rewarded with that appearance at media days and stuff. I just don't think that they've got enough pieces, and that schedule is tough. And I'm selling on them. I think Missouri can beat them. I think Kentucky can beat them, and I think they're going to have more than they can handle with Pittsburgh and maybe even South Carolina. So that's my take on it.
So you don't think that the Mays brothers are going to pave the way to a bowl game?
I do not.
Okay. I mean,
this is the Velus Jones. I didn't go real deep on the plays here, but I got a couple out of Velus Jones here. I like his name.
It is a good name. I mean, I agree with you, man. It's going to be really hard for them. Even a lot of the talented pieces they did have on that team, went 3-9 or like won 3 games last year, maybe 2. I forget with the all SEC schedule exactly what their record was, but it was bad. It was bad enough to get fired.
Not good.
Not good. So I would sell on the Tennessee. But I also feel like every year we have these surprise teams in the SEC and in college football as a whole. And just in terms of a guy who is proven from a scheme standpoint to be able to manufacture some points, Josh Heupel is on, one of the shorter lists of those people. So maybe they get something clicking at some point, but I wouldn't bet my money on it.
Yeah, I'm selling. That's all I got. Well, that was good. We've gone through half the SEC that aren't Georgia and Alabama, and we're going to continue on this. I think we're going to take a little break. We got some other shows that are we've got Dr. Ed Fang, a sports analytics and betting guy, come in this weekend. And I think we're going to try to do another show this week that's a little different too as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I guess from a dog news standpoint, I did see Georgia picked up a commitment from Dylan Bell this evening, 3-star wide receiver out of Houston, but one of those guys that maybe a little underrated that I think Georgia is confident on, as it had on campus, has been able to evaluate in person. I think this whole recruiting cycle is going to be weird because a lot of these guys didn't play football in their junior seasons, and it's a little hard to know who should be rated what. But yeah, kind of has a little bit of a Kyrus Jackson feel to him with some size. Might be another Adonai Mitchell type of guy who's a 3-star in a lot of services and gets on campus and looks much better than that. So keep an eye on him, and I'm sure there will be more news to come from the recruiting trail here shortly.
Yeah, I think we're going to probably try to before the season kicks off. We're going to try to do a recruiting recap and see where we stand. And this Dylan kid, I saw Axe talking about him. He looks like a Terry Godwin kind of player, size and everything. And sometimes we get lured in by the stars, but this is a guy that the staff wanted. So that's good enough for me.
Yeah, it's been good to see, especially in this cycle with the COVID and like just less tape out there. It's been good to see the staff getting these guys on campus doing their own evaluations and offering the guys who they think they need to offer, regardless of what they're rated by any of the services.
Yeah, here's the Dylan Gabriel commitment. I just was able to do that. Dylan Bell. Who's Dylan Gabriel?
Yeah. He's the quarterback at UCF.
Dang, solid. Yeah, we're 40 minutes. We're 40 minutes in. We've got the fans we're gonna keep at this point. So
yeah, totally.
I just wanted to put it up there. I can do that.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think he is a very polished looking route runner. I mean, like he's played a little bit lower level of competition, kind of private school level, and so you can tell there's times where just like he's just so much more athletically superior to the guy across from him, where he gets a little lazy with his routes. But when he gets pressed, his routes are really clean, and you can also, just looking at his body type, you can tell he's taking the weight room really seriously from a young age. So he might be one of those guys that comes in developed and ready to go on early on.
Well, Graham, thank you for all that, man. You pack it in. I really, I think.
Thank you.
We had another good show. We're gonna do these again, but we're gonna take a little break, as we said. Anything else before we wrap it up?
That is Mr. Josh Hancher. You can find him on Twitter at dog_stats. He will have all the pretty graphs and charts and cool stuff that you've seen on the broadcast tonight. My name is Graham Coffey. You can find me on Twitter at dogoutwest. And thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to Dog Sports Live on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice. You can also find us on Twitter at dogsports_live. And we've been having a lot of fun over there, lots of good debates and conversations. So jump in on that and join us for some football talk.
Absolutely. We love the interactions from everybody, even when they get a little hot with the opposing fan bases. But, that's why we're all fans. We're fired up. So
engagement is engagement.
Engagement's engagement. All right. We love you guys. Graham, good job. And
you too, man. Thank you.
All right. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.